They say the worst betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people you tucked into bed at night, the ones you skipped meals for, just to see them eat. My name is Lucille Garner. I'm 68 years old, a retired school teacher. And until last year, I thought I had a family. I thought I had a son who loved me. But what I had was something else entirely. It all began after my husband Harold passed. We'd built a modest life together. Nothing extravagant, just our cozy two-bedroom home, a reliable pension, and a lot of quiet moments. The house was ours, paid off, brick by brick, thanks to Harold's careful planning and my frugality. I was never flashy, but I was proud. That little blue house was supposed to be my sanctuary in old age. Then came the storm. My son David and his wife Mara. They called me in the middle of the night, one February. Their voices trembled through the phone. "Mum, the bank's threatening foreclosure. We just need a place to stay for a little while, just until we get things sorted." I didn't hesitate. Of course I said yes. What mother wouldn't? They moved in the next morning with boxes, a yapping little dog, and Mara's constant complaints. The place was too small, too outdated, too quiet. She didn't like the wallpaper Harold and I picked out 30 years ago. She didn't like my casseroles. And soon, she didn't like me. At first, I swallowed it. I told myself she was just stressed. But stress doesn't explain why she took down the family photos and replaced them with gold-framed quotes that said things like, "Energy is everything." Energy, apparently, didn't include respect. David, he changed too. He stopped joining me for our tea chats, stopped asking about my day. He started calling me Lucille instead of Mum. And when I mentioned it, he just smirked and said, "We're all adults here." The worst part wasn't the space they took up, but the space they erased me from. My garden became their dog's bathroom. My bedroom became the guest suite. They moved me into the smaller room, the one with the drafty window and no closet. I still said nothing. But then, my pension payments started arriving late, and when they came, the amounts were smaller. I thought it was an error. I called the pension office, waited 40 minutes on hold, and the woman on the other end said gently, "But ma'am, the change in deposit details came from your end, from the joint account." "Joint account?" I asked, heart pounding. "I don't have a joint account." But apparently, I did. A week earlier, someone had added my name to David's bank account, claiming I approved it, and now my pension was being funneled straight into it. I don't know how long I sat there after that call. I stared at the floral wallpaper that Mara hated. I stared at Harold's old chair in the corner, and I felt like a fool. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to them laugh in the living room, clinking wine glasses, playing music I didn't recognize. They were living a life I was funding, without consent. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that maybe David thought this would help with bills, that he'd ask me first. But deep down, I knew. He wasn't confused. He was counting on me to be too old, too quiet, too loving to fight back. He was almost right. Until the next evening, when I decided to ask them, gently, calmly, what had happened. It was the night I realized my place in their world, and the moment everything shifted. The next evening, I waited until after dinner. They had just finished a pizza, and the empty box sat on the kitchen counter. I had made a pot of lentil stew, but they didn't touch it. I stood by the sink, drying my hands, and said as softly as I could, "David, can I speak to you for a moment? Privately." He looked up from his phone and raised an eyebrow. "Whatever you have to say, just say it." Mara didn't even pretend to leave. She leaned back in her chair, smirking, wine glass in hand. I tried not to shake. "I spoke with the pension office. They told me my payments are going into a joint account, your account. I didn't authorize that. I didn't sign anything." David leaned back too. "Well, you said we could stay here. You said you wanted to help. We were just making it easier. Taking my pension? I asked, barely able to breathe. Without asking me. Mara chuckled and said, Lucille, you weren't exactly keeping up with the finances anyway. We handled it for you, like responsible adults. My voice rose before I could stop it. You stole from me. David's face darkened. We didn't steal. You're being dramatic. We just redirected what was already coming to this household. You live here, we live here. It's shared income. That's not how this works, I snapped. That money is for my bills, my food, my medicine. And you've got a roof over your head, don't you? He cut me off. That's when Mara stood up and walked toward me, arms crossed. Honestly, you should be thanking us. You think this house is so perfect. It's falling apart. The wiring's ancient. The water heater's junk. We've upgraded your life. I didn't ask for upgrades, I said, tears burning. I asked for family. David scoffed. You know what? Fine. You want your precious money. Take your house too. Live alone in this museum until the end. That's what you really want, right? To die surrounded by dusty photos and silence. He laughed. Mara laughed. And the second stood there frozen, like my breath had been punched out of me. Then David turned, grabbed his keys and said, We'll make other arrangements. Enjoy the quiet, Lucille. They left that night, took most of the things they'd moved in with, and a few that weren't theirs. The microwave, my old record player, even Harold's tools from the garage. The house felt hollow. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the edges of my cardigan, rocking slightly, trying not to cry. And then I walked to the cabinet where I kept all my documents. Birth certificate, house deed, my marriage certificate, and tucked behind a folder was my bank logbook. I flipped it open. 2 weeks of pension payments, thousands of dollars, gone, withdrawn, used, like I didn't matter. I stood up and made a call, first to the pension office, then to the bank. I'd like to remove my name from that joint account, I told them, effective immediately. There was a pause. We'll need to file a fraud report, the banker said carefully. This may involve an investigation. Good, I replied. Let's begin. The next day, I visited my local branch. I brought my ID, the logbook, and my heartache. I sat across from a woman named Michelle, who looked at me kindly when I said, I trusted my son, and he took everything. Michelle didn't look surprised. She nodded like she'd heard it before, too many times. We froze the account. We reversed the most recent unauthorized transfer. I set up a new account in my name alone, protected, secured. And then I called the mortgage lender listed on one of the account transactions, the same one my pension had been unknowingly paying. I told them the money being used was stolen. I told them it was never his to spend, and then I waited. The silence that filled the house after that was no longer loneliness. It was justice, beginning to echo. 3 weeks passed before I heard anything. In that time, the house settled into a kind of hush. No more loud music, no clinking wine glasses, no Mara slamming cabinets just to prove she lived there. Just me, and the tick of the clock above Harold's old recliner. I watered my plants. I cooked for one. I even rearranged the living room the way I liked it, before Mara turned it into something that looked like a furniture showroom. I started sleeping again. Deep, undisturbed sleep. But underneath it all, I waited. And then it happened. It was a Thursday afternoon. Overcast skies. I was knitting in the sunroom when my neighbor from across the street, Marlene, called. Lucille, she said breathlessly, there's a moving truck in front of David's house. They're being evicted. I sat perfectly still. Evicted. She told me the bank officials were there with documents. There was shouting. A woman, likely Mara, was screaming at someone on the phone. I didn't go to the window. I didn't gloat. I just stared at my hands. They weren't shaking. A few hours later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and there he stood, David, disheveled, pale, no jacket in the winter air. "You ruined us," he hissed. "You went to the bank? To the lender? You used my pension," I said simply. "You used me." "We were trying to build something," he said. "You never helped us get ahead." I felt something snap in me. Not anger, not grief, something cleaner. "You used my name, my trust, my retirement. You stole from the woman who raised you, who packed your lunch when I couldn't even afford meat. You don't get to talk about building something on a foundation of betrayal." He didn't reply. Then I asked, "Where's Mara?" His silence was my answer. She'd left, the moment things got hard. A week later, a letter arrived. It was a formal complaint, typed, no emotion. David was trying to dispute the pension reversal. His tone was cold and legal. I brought it to my lawyer, who handled the reply. She smiled at me as she read the letter and said, "It's paper arrogance. He won't win." He didn't. The bank denied his dispute. The pension office upheld the fraud complaint. I got a full reversal and a written apology from the bank. And David? He was now blacklisted by 2 institutions, ineligible for new credit. And, according to the whispers that started to reach me, he was drowning, jobless, alone. And Mara. She was already seen around town with a new man, clean-cut, dressed well. A realtor. The kind of man who thrives on someone else's ruin. Marlene told me she saw them at a brunch spot, laughing like she hadn't just walked out of a collapsed life. David tried to call, first once, then 3 times, then 6. I didn't answer. The woman who raised him always ran to him. The woman who loved him had always fixed things. This time, I let the silence do the speaking. Because this time, he needed to sit in it, feel it, and maybe learn what it really means to be alone. It was early spring when the wedding invitation arrived, pale pink envelope. My niece, Clara, my sister's youngest, was marrying her longtime boyfriend in a small ceremony just outside of town. I almost didn't go. The idea of being around family felt fragile. I didn't know who had heard what, who believed what, but something in me, some old thread of strength, nudged me toward the mirror that morning and whispered, "Go." So I put on Harold's favorite blue shawl, the one with the tiny silver leaf pin I wore to his memorial. I brushed my hair, pinned it neatly, and took the old Ford down the county road to the church where Clara was set to marry. The ceremony was beautiful, honest. 2 people looking each other in the eye like there were no cameras, no filters, just breath and vows. But it was the reception where the truth came spilling out. I was at a corner table, quietly sipping apple cider, when 2 women I didn't know sat near me. One of them was Mara's cousin. I recognized her from a holiday photo years ago. She didn't recognize me. "Did you hear what happened to David?" the cousin whispered, barely containing her glee. "Evicted. Mara had to call her ex just to move her stuff. Left him with debt, no job, and no house." "Oh, I heard more than that," the other woman said. "She's living with that realtor guy now. Brian something. She's already got him house hunting with her. Poor David didn't even see it coming." I stared into my cup. My hands didn't shake. And then one of them said something I'll never forget. Apparently his mother turned him in, froze his accounts, took back everything, and now he's begging people for a place to stay. I turned slightly. The cousin was still talking like I was invisible. "Can you imagine your own mother doing that?" But the other woman just laughed. "No, honey. I can imagine a mother finally waking up." And I smiled. Just a little. Because someone got it. Someone understood. Later that night, I saw him. David. He wasn't part of the wedding, just lurking at the edge of the parking lot. He wore a wrinkled dress shirt, the kind you pull out of a box, not a closet. He had bags under his eyes and stood staring at Mara as she clung to her new man, laughing like the world owed her nothing. He tried to approach her. She brushed him off like lint from a jacket. He stumbled back. His face looked lost, childlike, afraid. For a second, I thought about walking up to him, saying something. But what would I say? Would I remind him of the boy who used to leave me sticky notes in his lunchbox that said, "I love you, Mum"? Or the teenager who promised he'd take care of me when I was old? That boy was gone. This man, this hollow-eyed version of him, was a stranger. And so, I walked past him, my heels tapping softly on the pavement. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look back. But I know he saw me. I know he recognized the silence. That it said more than anything words could have offered. When I got home that night, I placed the wedding favor on the mantel, a little glass jar of honey, and thought to myself, sometimes life gives you sweetness after bitterness, but only if you stop handing your jar to people who keep spilling it. The voicemails started the next morning. At first, they came every couple of days, then daily, then twice a day. David's voice sounded different, not angry, not bitter, just tired. "Mum, I know I messed up. I know you're hurt. I just need to talk. Please." I didn't respond. He sent a text next. "I'm sorry. Please." No punctuation, no pride. Just 2 words, barely holding him together. Then came the knock on the door. It was raining that night. Light drizzle, almost quiet. I peeked through the curtain, and there he was. Soaked. Alone. Shoulders hunched. I didn't open the door. He spoke softly through the wood. "Mum, I'm not asking to come in. I don't know where else to go. She's gone. I can't get work. I don't have anyone." I stood on the other side, hand on the doorknob. My breath caught in my chest. I didn't speak. He eventually left. The next day, I found a small paper bag on the porch. Inside it was the silver picture frame I'd been looking for, the one with David's kindergarten photo and Harold's thumbprint on the back. I stared at it for a long time. This was the first thing he ever made for me in school. A Mother's Day gift. He was 5. He had misspelled love as luf. I kept it all these years. And now, it sat quietly on the step like a peace offering. I almost crumbled. But then I remembered something. A few weeks earlier, after filing the fraud case, I'd asked a private financial assistant to dig deeper, just to see what else had been touched in my name. He found a loan. Not just any loan. A high-interest cash loan taken out by Mara in my name. Co-signed with forged documents. She had used my address, my ID number, and a fake signature to apply. The money went straight to an account under her maiden name. David had to know. There's no way she could have done it without access to the documents they had boxed up and moved from my home, without at least a little help. And still, he stood on my porch, begging. Still, he wanted my forgiveness. My home. I thought about calling the police, pressing charges. But instead, I called my lawyer. We filed a fraud report. Again. This time, not just with the pension office, but with the lending institution. 2 weeks later, I received confirmation. The loan was frozen, charges pending. David sent another message. "Did you tell them? I'm being investigated now. I could go to jail." And that's when I finally replied. "You should have thought about that before letting her rob your mother." He didn't respond. Not that night. Not the next. But a few days later, I heard a car pull up. He got out, alone, no umbrella, no bag. And this time, he didn't knock. He just sat on the porch step, head in his hands, like a boy who didn't know how to come home. But he wasn't a boy. He was a man who'd made choices. And I was a mother who had to decide if I would ever open that door again. He kept coming back. Not every day, but enough. Once to bring back an old box of Harold's records I thought were lost. Another time to leave a bouquet of wilted daisies in a chipped glass jar. And once, just to sit on the porch swing for hours, as if the wind might carry my forgiveness through the door. I never stopped watching, from behind the curtain, from the upstairs window, from the kitchen sink. But I said nothing. Until one evening, a different knock came. Not David. This time it was a man in a tailored navy blue suit, holding a file folder and wearing the kind of forced smile you only see in courtrooms and real estate offices. "Mrs. Garner?" he asked politely. "Yes? I'm here on behalf of Ridgewell Lending. We're following up on the claim you filed last month. I thought you should know. Mara has officially defaulted. The address listed in the paperwork, your address, was used as collateral. She's also under investigation for 2 other identity fraud cases." I nodded slowly. "Will I need to testify?" "Unlikely," he said. "You've already provided more than enough documentation. The case will move forward regardless." I thanked him, closed the door gently, and stood there in the hallway for a long while. She wasn't just careless. She was dangerous. And David had been complicit. Whether through ignorance or cowardice didn't matter anymore. I sat down with a cup of tea and thought about what Harold would say. He would have been furious. But more than that, he would have been disappointed. He always believed David had his flaws. But he thought we raised a man who understood right from wrong. Then again, so did I. That night, I went up to the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. Dust danced in the flashlight beam as I opened a box marked David College. Inside were his old textbooks, a faded graduation sash, and a letter I'd forgotten he wrote me the week after Harold died. I unfolded it carefully. The ink was smudged in one corner. "Mum, I know I haven't said it enough, but thank you. For everything. You gave up so much to raise me. I promise I'll make you proud. I won't let you down." I pressed the paper to my chest and wept, because he had let me down. But the boy who wrote that letter, he still lived somewhere inside the man who sat on my porch with shame eating him alive. The next morning, I made a call to a social worker I knew from church. Her name was Brenda. She worked with adults struggling with housing, employment, and legal recovery. "I have someone I'd like you to meet," I said. "He's my son. But this isn't about fixing what he did. It's about making sure he knows how to fix himself." Brenda was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'll come by tomorrow." And so, the next day, when David showed up again, early, hair-brushed, wearing the same coat from weeks ago, I opened the door. Just a crack. He froze. "I'm not here to scream," he whispered. "I'm not here to beg. I just wanted to see you, one last time." "I have someone I want you to meet," I said softly, opening the door wider. Brenda stepped forward, professional and kind. David blinked, confused. "She can help you," I told him. "Not with shortcuts, not with lies, with actual tools, real support. If you're ready for that." He nodded slowly, speechless. I handed him a pamphlet, gave him Brenda's number. Then I closed the door gently. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. 2 weeks passed before I heard from him again. Not a voicemail this time, not a text, but a knock. A steady, hesitant knock. When I opened the door, David stood there, not quite the same man who had once mocked me. His shoulders slumped, his hair unkempt, his eyes red as if he hadn't slept in days. Brenda's pamphlet was clutched in his hand like a lifeline. "Mum?" His voice broke on the word. "I've been meeting with her. With Brenda. I've started looking for work. I'm so sorry." I didn't speak. I just looked at him. Let him feel the silence that weighed heavier than any words could. "I know I don't deserve anything," he said finally, his voice trembling. "But I don't know where else to go. Mara's gone. The house is gone. Everything I thought I built. It was all just sand slipping through my fingers. And I pushed away the only person who ever stood by me." He sank to his knees on the porch, like the little boy who used to cry after scraping his knees in the yard. Except this time, I didn't rush to hold him. I didn't fix it. "You told me once," I said quietly. that this house was just a museum, that I should live here alone until my end. Do you remember that? His face twisted with shame. I was angry. I was stupid. You were cruel, I interrupted. You laughed while I stood there with my heart breaking. Tears ran down his face, dripping onto the porch floor. I can't take it back. I can't undo it. But I will spend the rest of my life proving I can be better. Please, Mum, just give me a chance. I took a step forward and held out a key. His hand shot out to take it, but I shook my head. Not to this house, I said. This is still mine. You need to rebuild your own life first. But this key is to the shed. I left you some tools. The garden's a mess. Start there. His face crumpled. He understood. This was not forgiveness, not fully. This was work. A second chance that would taste like humility. For weeks he came by, quietly. No demands, no shouting. He mowed the lawn. He fixed the old fence Harold once built. He weeded the garden. And every time I watched from the porch as he kept his head down, sweat streaking his face, not asking for anything in return. Neighbors noticed. Some even whispered about how the once proud man now labored in his mother's yard, humbled and silent. It was a kind of shame he carried, and maybe that was the point. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the maple trees, he came up the steps, dirt on his hands and exhaustion on his face. Mum, he said softly, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. I studied him for a long moment, and then I said the words that I think broke him more than anger ever could. I forgive you, David. He closed his eyes, and tears slipped down his cheeks. Not relief, but shame, because he knew that forgiveness wasn't a pass. It was a mirror, showing him what he had become and what he had to rebuild. Weeks later, I saw him smile for the first time. Not a full smile, but something close, while trimming the rose bushes Harold had planted decades ago. And I thought, maybe this was enough. Not revenge, not bitterness, just a quiet kind of justice, a mother's mercy that lingers like a lesson you can never forget. People think forgiveness is easy, I say now, my voice steady. But sometimes, forgiving someone is the hardest punishment of all, because it forces them to see who they were and who they'll have to become.